A true story from Memphis, Tennessee. My daughter listed my beach cottage on Airbnb without telling me, charged strangers $275 a night to sleep in the bed I bought with my retirement money, under the quilt my dead husband picked out the Christmas before he died. When I found the listing, there were 47 five-star reviews. 47 families had walked through my front door, and I didn't know a single one of their names. So I changed every lock, every password, every code. And when my daughter drove down for Memorial Day weekend with a trunk full of beach towels, she couldn't get past the porch. The notification came on a Wednesday morning. I was sitting at my kitchen table in Memphis with a cup of coffee and a library book I'd already renewed twice. My phone buzzed, and I almost didn't look. At 69, I've made peace with the fact that most notifications are either spam or disappointment, but something made me pick it up. A Google alert. I'd set it years ago for the address of the cottage, back when I was tracking the renovation progress and wanted to see if the county updated the permit records online. I hadn't thought about that alert in over a year. The link took me to a listing on Airbnb, charming Gulf Shores cottage. Steps from the beach, sleeps 8, full kitchen, pet-friendly. There was a photo of my living room, my pale blue couch, my driftwood coffee table, the watercolor of the Gulf that Charles and I bought at a street fair in Fairhope on our 30th anniversary. He haggled the artist down $12 and then tipped her $20 because he felt guilty. That's the kind of man he was. Generous in ways that surprised even himself. I scrolled through the listing. 18 photos. My bedroom. My kitchen. The back porch with the rocking chairs I ordered from a woodworker in Pascagoula, who hand-carved each armrest. The bathroom with the clawfoot tub I spent 3 weeks hunting for on Craigslist. The garden I planted myself, on my knees in the Alabama sand, pushing rosemary and lantana into soil that didn't want to cooperate. Every photo had been taken with care, good lighting. Angles that made the rooms look larger than they were. Someone had styled the kitchen counter with a bowl of lemons and a French press that wasn't mine. The host name said D&T Coastal Retreats. D&T Denise and Troy, my daughter and her husband, had turned my home into a rental property. And they had been doing it, based on the review dates, for 14 months. I need to tell you how that cottage came to be, because without that, none of this makes sense. My name is Gwendolyn Price. People who love me call me Gwen. I was a school librarian for 36 years at Whitehaven Elementary in Memphis. I shelved books, read stories to children who sometimes hadn't eaten breakfast, fixed spines with packing tape, and built a summer reading program that the district used as a model for 10 years after I retired. I love that job. I love the quiet of the stacks and the noise of the children and the strange, beautiful space between the two. Charles was a postal carrier, Route 4217. He walked 11 miles a day for 28 years delivering mail in the Cordova neighborhood. He knew every dog's name, every retiree's birthday, every house that left him a bottle of water on hot days. He came home each evening with sore feet and stories about people's lives that he'd pieced together from their mail. He'd say, "The Hendersons are going to Hawaii, 3rd time this year." Or, "Someone on Sycamore is getting a lot of medical bills. I hope they're okay." He died 4 years ago. Congestive heart failure. It wasn't sudden, but it was still a shock. The way it is when something you've been dreading finally arrives and you realize you were never actually ready. The doctors told us he had maybe 2 years. He got 18 months. In those 18 months, we talked about everything. What I should do with his tools, who should get his fishing rods, whether I should sell the house and the cottage. The cottage was Charles's dream, not a mansion, not a vacation home with a pool and a boat lift, just a small place near the water where he could sit on a porch and listen to the Gulf. He'd been talking about it since our 20s. Every vacation we took to the coast, he'd drive slow past the little houses near the shore and say, "One day, Gwen, One day we're going to have a place like that. Nothing fancy, just ours. He never got it. We were never poor, but we were never ahead either. 2 kids, 1 income and a half, a mortgage, car payments, braces. Life. The kind that doesn't leave room for beach houses. After he passed, I sold the house in Memphis. It was too big, too quiet. Every room had his echo in it, and I couldn't keep living inside an echo. I took the equity, combined it with his life insurance and my pension savings, and I bought a 3-bedroom cottage in Gulf Shores, Alabama. $168,000 for the house and land. Another $41,000 in renovations. New roof, new plumbing. I kept the original hardwood floors because Charles always said wood floors told the story of a house, and I wanted this house to start its story honest. I moved in on a Tuesday in March. I remember because the movers were late, and I sat on the porch steps eating a gas station sandwich and listening to the waves 2 blocks away. The sound carried on the wind. It sounded like breathing, like the earth was exhaling. I thought, Charles, I did it. It's not fancy, but it's ours. I put his photo on the bookshelf in the living room, the one from our trip to Gulf Shores 15 years earlier. The trip where we walked the beach at sunset and he turned to me and said, "Promise me something. Promise me you'll live near water someday, even if I'm not there. You deserve to hear the waves every morning." I set that photo where it could see the window, so he could watch the light change over the water, even if only in my imagination. My daughter Denise is 44. She lives in Birmingham with her husband Troy and their 2 teenagers. Denise was a sweet girl. Truly. She made me Mother's Day cards out of construction paper until she was 16. She called me every Sunday in college. She cried at her father's funeral so hard that Troy had to carry her to the car. But something shifted after Charles died. Or maybe it shifted when she married Troy. I'd spent a long time trying to figure out which came first. The way you stare at a crack in a wall and wonder whether the foundation moved or the wall just gave up. Troy is a regional sales manager for a plumbing supply company. He drives a truck that's too big for any parking lot and talks about money the way some men talk about sports, constantly, competitively, as if life were a game and the score was your bank balance. He's not a bad man. I want to be clear about that. He's never raised his voice to me. He's never been cruel in any obvious way. He's just calculated. Every kindness has a line item. Every favor has a return. The first time they visited the cottage, it was beautiful. Denise stood in the doorway and her eyes filled up. "Mom," she said, "Dad would have loved this." And she was right. He would have. They stayed a week. The kids boogie-boarded every afternoon. Troy grilled fish he caught off the pier. Denise and I sat on the porch at night and talked the way we hadn't talked in years, about her father, about the early days, about the time she was 7 and insisted on mailing a letter to Santa in July, because she said he probably got lonely in the off-season, and Charles walked it to the mailbox with her, dead serious, and told her he'd make sure it got priority delivery. That visit was the reason I built the cottage. That feeling. Family in the rooms, and laughter in the walls, and the Gulf, just close enough to remind you that the world was bigger than your grief. The second visit, Troy brought his laptop. He sat at the kitchen table most of the day, working calls, tapping spreadsheets. He mentioned casually over dinner that Gulf Shores rental properties were killing it on the short-term market. He said a 3-bedroom near the beach could pull in $2,000 a week during peak season. He said it like he was commenting on the weather. Informational. No agenda. Except Troy always had an agenda. I said nothing. Denise changed the subject. But I noticed Troy taking photos of the house that weekend. The kitchen. The porch. The view from the back steps. I told myself he was just proud of the place. I told myself he was just proud of the place. I told myself it was innocent. 3 months later, Denise called and asked if she and Troy could use the cottage for a long weekend in October. I said, of course. She asked for the Wi-Fi password. I gave it. She asked if I'd gotten a smart lock yet. I hadn't. She said Troy could install one. It's just easier, Mom. You won't have to worry about keys. I said that sounded fine. Troy drove down on a Thursday and installed the lock himself. A keypad with a 4-digit code. He texted me the code. 7281. I saved it in my phone. I didn't think about it again. What I didn't know is that Troy also installed a second smart lock on the back door and a lockbox on the porch railing. And he connected both locks to an app on his phone that allowed him to change the codes remotely. And he set up a Ring doorbell that fed to his phone, not mine. And he created the Airbnb listing that same weekend, using photos he'd taken over 2 visits and a description he probably wrote at my kitchen table while I was at the grocery store buying shrimp for dinner. 14 months, 47 reviews, $28,600 in rental income based on the listing's calendar and pricing. I did the math 3 times sitting at my kitchen table in Memphis, still holding the coffee that had gone cold. $28,600 from my house. My cottage. Charles's dream. And I didn't see a single dollar. I called Denise. It went to voicemail. I called again. Same. On the 3rd call, she picked up. Hey, Mom, what's going on? I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. A pause. I could hear Troy's voice in the background, muffled, and then the sound of a door closing. She had walked into another room. Okay, she said, carefully. The way you say okay when you already know what's coming. Is my cottage on Airbnb? Silence. 4 seconds. 5. I counted. Mom, it's not what you think. What do I think, Denise? Troy set it up as a way to help cover the maintenance costs. You know, the property taxes, the lawn service. It adds up, and we didn't want to bother you with it. Bother me with the costs of my own house. We were trying to help. By letting strangers sleep in my bed without telling me. Mom, 47 reviews, Denise. 47. Someone named Jennifer from Tuscaloosa gave the quilt on my bed 4 stars because it was a little thin. That quilt was your father's last Christmas gift to me. He picked it out himself. He could barely lift his arm and he pointed at it in the catalog and said, "That one, Gwen will like that one." And a stranger rated it 4 stars. She was quiet. In the background, I heard Troy's voice again. Louder. She whispered something to him. Then she came back. I know this looks bad, but Troy's been handling everything. The cleaning crew, the scheduling, he's put a lot of work into it. He's put a lot of work into my house. It's not just about the money, Mom. How much, Denise? What? How much is he collected? From my property, with my furniture, in my name. How much? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Did any of it go to property taxes? I asked. Another silence. Then, quietly, I think Troy was going to use some of it for. Did any of it go to my property taxes, Denise? I don't know. I do. I just checked my county records. I've been paying my own taxes this whole time. Direct withdrawal from my bank account. The same way I've been paying them since I bought the house. She started to say something, but I was already done listening. Not done loving her. You never stop loving your child. But done listening to the explanations that aren't explanations. Done waiting for the apology that's actually just a redirect. I'm going to handle this, I said. And I want you to know that I'm not asking for your permission. Mom, please don't do anything drastic. Troy says if you just let him explain the financial, Troy doesn't get to explain my finances to me. Good night, Denise. I hung up. And I sat in that kitchen for a long time. The coffee was completely cold. The book sat open on the table, unread. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own breathing, steady and deliberate, the way Charles used to breathe when he was trying to stay calm. The next morning, I drove to Gulf Shores, 5.5 hours from Memphis, I brought a thermos of coffee, 2 ham sandwiches, and a folder of every document I owned related to the cottage. Deed, insurance, tax records, renovation receipts, all in my name, every single one. I arrived at 2 in the afternoon. The cottage looked the same from outside. The garden was trimmed. The porch was swept. But there was a lockbox mounted to the railing that I hadn't put there, and a small sign by the front steps that said, "Welcome. Your code is in your confirmation email." Like a hotel. My home had a check-in sign. I walked up the steps and punched in the code Troy had given me, 7281. The lock flashed red. Code not accepted. He had changed it. I stood on my own porch, locked out of my own house by a code I didn't know, and for a moment the anger was so thick I couldn't breathe. But only for a moment. I had come prepared. I called a locksmith in Foley, a man named Jimmy, who showed up in 40 minutes with a toolbox and a calm disposition. I showed him my driver's license, my deed, and my property tax receipt. He looked at the documents, looked at me, and said, "Ma'am, it's your house. You say change the locks. I changed the locks." He removed both smart locks, front and back. He installed new deadbolts, keyed alike, and handed me 3 keys. Traditional brass keys, the kind that don't need Wi-Fi or an app or someone else's permission. I paid him cash. Then I walked through my own front door for the first time in months. The inside was clean. I'll give Troy that. Whoever he hired for the cleaning crew did a good job, but the house didn't smell like mine. It smelled like linen spray and strangers. The personal touches were gone. My books had been removed from the shelves and replaced with decorative objects. Driftwood, fake coral, a sign that said "Life's a Beach" in turquoise cursive. Charles' photo was in the closet, face down in a box with my winter blankets, like something to be stored until the season was right. I picked up that photo and held it against my chest. I stood in the living room of the house I built for him, and I said, out loud, to no one, and to him, "I found you. I'm putting you back." I set him on the bookshelf, right where he belonged, facing the window, facing the water. Then I opened my laptop and went to the Airbnb listing. I found the contact information for every upcoming reservation, 6 bookings over the next 2 months, and I sent each one a message through the platform explaining that the property was no longer available for rental, that I was the legal owner, and that full refunds would be processed. I reported the listing as unauthorized. I changed the Wi-Fi password. I disconnected the Ring doorbell and put it in a box by the front door for Troy to collect at his convenience. Then I made myself a cup of tea and sat on the back porch and watched the sun begin to drop toward the water. My phone rang 20 minutes later. Troy. "Gwen, what the hell is going on?" "I just got 6 cancellation notices and the lock codes aren't working." "The codes aren't working because the smart locks are gone. I had them removed." "You can't just..." "Troy, let me save you some time. I've spoken with my attorney. The cottage is in my name. Sole owner. No co-signers, no operating agreements, no rental license with your name on it. You listed my property on a commercial platform without my knowledge or consent and collected income from it for over a year. My attorney says I have grounds for legal action, but I'm not going to pursue that. Not because you don't deserve it, because I don't want to spend my energy on it." He was quiet for 3 seconds. Then, "Denise and I were just trying to maximize the investment." "It's not an investment, Troy. It's my home, and you don't get to maximize someone else's home. We put work into that property. You installed locks that kept me out and a doorbell that watched me arrive. That's not maintenance. That's occupation." He started to say something about partnership, about family, about how I was overreacting. I let him talk. When he was done, I said one thing. "The lockbox is on the porch with the Ring doorbell. You can pick them up whenever you like, but call first." because from now on, no one enters this house without my invitation. I hung up and blocked his number. Not forever, just long enough to breathe. Denise called that night. She was crying. Mom, Troy is furious. He says you threatened him with a lawyer. I told him the truth. He says you've changed the locks and canceled all the bookings. I have, Mom. That money was helping us. Troy's commissions are down, and the kids need Denise. I said her name the way I used to say it when she was small and had wandered too close to the street. Firm, full of love, full of warning. That money came from my house, my deed, my property. You didn't tell me. You didn't ask. You let your husband turn my home into a business, and you hid it from me for over a year. I was going to tell you when. She didn't answer. I want you to listen to me, I said. I am your mother. I will love you until the last breath leaves my body, and probably after that too. But I will not be managed. I will not be handled, and I will not fund a life that treats me like a resource instead of a person. Do you understand? She cried harder. I let her, not because I enjoyed it, but because some things need to be felt before they can be understood. I also want you to know, I said, quieter now, that I've updated my will. The cottage goes to your brother Jerome, not as punishment, as protection, because Jerome has never once looked at something I built and calculated what it was worth per night. She gasped, literally gasped, like I had taken something from her. And maybe I had, but what I had taken was only ever mine to give. Mom, that's not fair. Fair is a weather report, baby. This is a decision. I called Jerome that night. My son, 41, lived in Nashville, worked as an electrician, called me every Sunday morning without fail, and started every conversation with, "How you doing, Mama? You eating enough?" He didn't know about any of it. Not the Airbnb, not the locks, not the money. I told him everything. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You want me to drive down there?" "No, baby. I handled it." "I know you did." I could hear him smiling. Pop would have done the same thing, except he would have changed the locks and then sat on the porch with a glass of sweet tea waiting for Troy to show up. I laughed. The first real laugh in weeks. Your father would have enjoyed that too much. Yeah, he would have. We talked for an hour. About Charles. About the cottage. About how some things are worth protecting, not because they're expensive, but because they hold the shape of someone you loved. After I hung up, I sat in the cottage alone. The house was quiet. The waves were audible through the open windows. Charles looked at me from the bookshelf, and I thought about what to do with this place now, not sell it. That was never the question. This was Charles's dream. I wasn't going to hand it to a stranger any more than I was going to hand it to a son-in-law with a spreadsheet. But I also didn't want to sit in it alone, guarding it like a museum. Charles didn't dream of a museum. He dreamed of a porch full of people and laughter that carried to the water. So I made a list, not a plan, not a strategy, just a list of names written on the back of a grocery receipt with a pen that was almost out of ink. Women I knew. Women who had given everything and been given nothing back. Women who deserved to hear the ocean. Alma. 72. She taught kindergarten at my school for 29 years. She could calm a crying child with one look and a hand on the shoulder. She retired 3 years ago, and her daughter moved her into a studio apartment to simplify things. Alma told me once over coffee that she hadn't cooked a meal in her own kitchen in 8 months because the studio didn't have a real stove. They gave me a hot plate, she said, like I'm in a dorm room. Estelle, 67. She ran the church food pantry every Saturday for 11 years. Never missed. Rain, holidays, her own husband's birthday, she was there, sorting cans, bagging rice, making sure every family that came through left with enough for the week. Her husband divorced her last year, and the paperwork he listed emotional neglect as the reason. She told me I was feeding 100 families a week, and he said I neglected him. Willa, 70. A retired nurse who spent 30 years at the VA hospital. She specialized in long-term care, the patients everyone else avoided, the ones who screamed at night, the ones who didn't remember their names. She sat with them anyway, held their hands, read them the newspaper. Her own children lived in 3 different states and called her on Christmas and her birthday. 2 calls a year. She kept a calendar in her kitchen and circled those dates in red, like they were appointments she couldn't miss. I called each of them. 3 phone calls, 3 stunned silences. You want me to come where? Gulf Shores, Willa. A week at my cottage. On me. But why? Because I have a house with an empty porch, and you have ears that haven't heard waves in too long. They came on a Friday in October. I picked them up from the Mobile airport, all 3 of them standing at the curb with small suitcases and big eyes, looking around like they'd arrived in a foreign country. Alma had bought a new hat for the trip. Estelle brought a casserole in a cooler because she said she couldn't show up empty-handed. Willa wore sneakers that were brand new and already giving her a blister, but she didn't complain. She just smiled and said, I can smell the salt already. I drove them to the cottage. When we pulled into the driveway, Willa saw the water from the back porch through the open windows, and she pressed her hand to her mouth. Alma walked to the garden and touched the rosemary like she was greeting an old friend. Estelle went straight to the kitchen, set down her casserole, and said, Now this is a real stove. That first night we sat on the porch. The rocking chairs creaked. The waves came in and went out, and none of us spoke for a long time. We just sat there, 4 women who had spent their entire lives making room for other people, finally taking up space themselves. Nobody asked us for anything. Nobody needed us to fix or carry or give. We just existed, together, in a house that belonged to someone who chose them on purpose. Estelle was the first to speak. She looked out at the water and said, You know what I haven't done in 11 years? Sat down to eat without checking if someone else had enough first. Alma said, I haven't slept past 6 a.m. since 1987. I might try it tomorrow. Willa said nothing. She just rocked in her chair and let the tears fall and didn't wipe them away, as if she'd decided, for once, that she didn't have to be the strong one. We spent that week living slowly. We cooked breakfast together. Big, messy breakfasts with too many eggs and not enough bacon and coffee that was always either too strong or too weak. We walked the beach in the mornings. Estelle collected shells and lined them up on the porch railing like a tiny army. Alma waded into the Gulf up to her knees and stood there for 10 minutes with her eyes closed. When she came back, she said, The water's warm. Charles picked a good spot, and she was right. He did. Every evening, I lit a candle beside Charles's photo on the bookshelf. We each said something. Not a prayer, not a speech, just a true thing. Alma said, I am more than useful. Estelle said, Feeding everyone else doesn't count if you starve yourself. Willa said, I am allowed to rest. When it was my turn, I looked at Charles's face, that familiar, stubborn, gentle face, and I said, You were right about the water. I can hear it every morning. And it sounds like you. On the last night, we walked to the shore after dinner. The moon was out and the sand was cool under our feet. Willa took her shoes off and walked into the water up to her ankles. She stood there 60 years of holding everyone together, and she let the waves push and pull around her feet. She didn't move. She just stood. I'm going to come back here, she said. Not a question. A decision. The door's always open, I said. And I meant it. Every word. When I got back to Memphis, there was a letter from Troy. Not email, a physical letter typed on his company letterhead, suggesting that I owed him $4,200 for property management services rendered and that he would be consulting with his attorney regarding the disruption of a revenue-generating agreement. I read it once. Then I folded it and put it in the same drawer where I kept Charles's reading glasses and our wedding rings. Some things belong next to love so you can see the difference. I never responded. There was nothing to respond to. You can't bill someone for stealing their house, no matter how many official fonts you use. Denise sent a text 2 weeks later. "Mom, can we talk? Not about the house, just talk." I looked at that message for a long time. I thought about the little girl who mailed Santa in July. I thought about the woman who hid an Airbnb listing for 14 months. I thought about the distance between those two people and whether it was a canyon or a bridge. I typed back, "I'd like that, but not yet. I need a little more time." She replied with a heart emoji. I don't know what it meant. Maybe she didn't either, but it was something, a small, imperfect something. And sometimes that's where healing starts. Not with a grand gesture or a tearful apology, but with a heart sent into silence and the hope that someone on the other side is still listening. The cottage is still mine. Charles is still on the bookshelf. The rocking chairs are still on the porch. And 3 times a year now, I open the door and fill the rooms with women who've earned a week of ocean air and unhurried mornings and a table where no one asks them to serve. Last month, Alma called me. She said, "Gwen, I've been thinking about what you did. Not just the trip, the whole thing. How you took something that was stolen from you and turned it into something given. That's not revenge. That's grace." I thanked her, but she was only half right. It wasn't just grace. It was also stubbornness. The good kind, the kind that says, "I built this life and I will decide who walks through the door." Charles used to say something every morning before he left for his route. Rain or shine, sick or well. 30 years of the same 6 words. He'd kiss my forehead, pick up his mailbag, and say, "Keep the porch light on for me." So I do, every night. Even now, the porch light stays on at the Gulf Shores cottage, not because I'm waiting for Charles. I know he's not walking up those steps, but because a light left on means someone is welcome. It means the door is not locked. It means this house remembers what it was built for. Not for profit, not for management, not for strangers paying $275 a night. For the people who know that a home is not an investment, it's a promise. And the porch light is how you keep it. This is Drift Tales, where overlooked women become undeniable, where silence becomes a sentence, and the sentence is this: I built it, I kept it, and I decide who comes home. If you've ever been locked out of something you paid for with your own hands and your own heart, then you already know. The key was never the problem. The problem was forgetting that the door was yours. Subscribe to Drift Tales, because every woman deserves a porch light left on.